Gardeners everywhere talk about compost as if it were magic, and in many ways it is. But here's where confusion sets in. How much compost do you actually need? Some say spread it thick, others say sprinkle lightly, and still others warn that too much can actually harm your soil. This uncertainty leaves gardeners second-guessing every shovel. The truth is simpler, and today we're breaking it down with real ratios, practical examples and timeless methods that gardeners have trusted for centuries. By the end of this guide, you'll know exactly how much compost your soil needs for vegetables, fruit trees, lawns, and potted plants. One of the biggest misconceptions in gardening is that compost should be added endlessly, as if there could never be too much of a good thing. But just like food, balance matters. Soil needs organic matter, but it also needs structure, air pockets, and space for roots. Dumping too much compost can smother plants, create waterlogging, or lead to nutrient imbalances. You know, that's why those wise old farmers always treated compost as a supplement, not the whole meal. Healthy soil isn't just about nutrients, it's about living systems. Good soil, well, it has about 45% minerals, 25% air, 25% water, and only about 5% organic matter. Compost, it feeds that 5%. It doesn't replace the entire soil body, but it enriches it with microbial life, humus, and slow-release nutrients. With that perspective, composting becomes clearer. You're aiming to build a living structure, not drown soil in organics. For vegetable beds, depth is the key. When building or refreshing vegetable beds, compost should be applied in a layer that ranges between 1/2 inch and 2 inches on top of the soil. Spread evenly and work gently into the first 6 inches of earth. This creates a rich planting zone. For example, if you're working with a 4x8 raised bed, a 1-inch layer of compost equals about 2.5 cubic feet of material. If you go thicker, say 2 inches, you'll need around 5 cubic feet. That depth is plenty to recharge the soil for an entire season without overwhelming roots. Amish and traditional market gardeners, they really follow the same formula. They always top their beds with about 1 to 2 inches before planting each season. For fruit trees and perennials, compost should be ringed, not just dumped in one spot. Fruit trees actually respond best when compost is spread in a nice wide circle around the drip line, rather than being piled right up against the trunk. The drip line, by the way, is the circle where rain falls off the tree's outermost branches. That's where feeder roots gather, and that's where compost should be applied. A 5-year-old apple tree, for instance, may have a drip line 8 feet wide. Spread a 2-inch deep layer of compost in that ring every spring. That works out to about 6 to 8 gallons of compost for a medium-sized tree. Grapes, berries and shrubs benefit from the same practice. Always feed the outer root zone, never the crown. For lawns, thin layers make the biggest difference. A mistake many homeowners make is dumping thick compost on lawns, which can end up suffocating the grass. The correct method is top dressing, which uses no more than a 1/4 inch layer raked evenly across the surface. This adds organic matter without blocking sunlight or creating clumps. So, to put numbers to it, covering 1,000 square feet of lawn needs about 3/4 of a cubic yard of compost if you're applying it at a 1/4 inch deep. Just spread it thinly, water it in, and then let the microbes and earthworms handle the rest. Honestly, this is exactly how estate gardeners and golf course keepers keep their turf resilient year after year. For potted plants, compost is best blended, not layered. Container plants live in confined spaces, so, balance matters even more. Potting mixes should never be pure compost, because roots need drainage. The rule of thumb is to mix compost at about 25 to 30% of the total volume. For instance, filling a 10-gallon container would mean using 3 gallons of compost blended with 7 gallons of soil or a soil-less mix. That ratio gives enough nutrition without turning the pot soggy. Herbs, vegetables and ornamentals all thrive under this formula, and you won't need constant fertilizing. When building new garden beds, more compost at the start pays off. On raw clay or sandy patches, spread 2 to 3 inches of compost and till or fork it into the top 6 to 8 inches. This front loads the soil with organic matter, jump-starting microbial life. For example, a 10 by 10 plot would need about 17 to 25 cubic feet of compost for that depth. It seems like a lot, but that one-time investment builds the base for years of soil improvement. Afterward, you can maintain fertility with smaller top-ups each season. All right, so here's the deal. The formula is pretty straightforward once you know the area and the depth you want. Compost volume in cubic feet is simply the length times the width times the depth, which you need to convert to feet. Then just divide by 27 to get cubic yards, and that's the way bulk compost is usually sold. Easy enough, right? Let's go through an example, just to make it clear. Say you want to cover a 100 square foot bed with 1 inch of compost. So, what you do is take that 100 square feet and multiply it by 0.083 feet, which is the equivalent of 1 inch. And there you have it. That equals 8.3 cubic feet. Simple as that. So, divide by 27 and you need about 1/3 of a cubic yard. That calculation works for any garden space, really saving you from guessing or, buying too much. The best times to apply compost are early spring and late fall. In spring, compost provides nutrients as plants start their season. In fall, it enriches soil while resting, giving microbes months to work it in. Mid-season applications are fine too, especially for heavy feeders. But honestly, the bulk should go on when soil biology is either waking up or preparing for winter rest. Amish farmers never measure compost by the pound or cubic foot. Instead, they judge by field needs. Heavier crops like corn get thick dressings, while lighter grains like oats get thin ones. Orchards receive an annual top-up, and gardens get a fresh coat each spring. So, their method really relies on consistency, not exact math. But honestly, the principle is the same as the formulas given here. You want to apply enough to recharge the soil, but never so much that compost replaces earth itself. If you have, say, a 4 by 4 garden bed, topping it with 1 inch of compost requires about 1.3 cubic feet. That's just one bag from most garden centres. That's enough to feed the bed for an entire season. Now, if you have 3 fruit trees, each about 5 years old, 6 gallons per tree will do the trick. If you're maintaining a 500 square foot lawn, a 1/4 inch top dressing equals less than half a cubic yard. With these numbers in hand, composting goes from guesswork to precision. The right amount of compost really depends on the crop and soil, but honestly, the rules are pretty simple. For vegetables, you want to use about 1 to 2 inches per season. When it comes to trees, go for ringed applications around the drip line. For lawns, you should use no more than a 1/4 inch. And for pots, just mix compost at about 25 to 30%. And, you know, for new beds, you'll want to add a heavier layer to really get the cycle started. If you stick to these guidelines, compost will serve its true purpose, building soil that just keeps getting better year after year. So, if this guide cleared up the confusion on how much compost to add, go ahead and share it with another gardener who could use a little clarity. And hey, don't forget to subscribe to Backyard Wisdom, where you'll learn time-tested methods to build thriving soil without wasting time or money. Each week, we uncover practical gardening wisdom that never goes out of style.